My name is Elena Vance. I'm 29 years old, and for the last 3 years, I have been the designated failure of my family. Not because I did anything wrong. Not because I broke the law, or hurt anyone, or wasted my life. My crime was simple. I quit a stable, respectable job to build an AI energy startup out of a cold, oil-stained garage. That Sunday dinner in Seattle started like every other Sunday dinner had started for the last 3 years, with my brother Brandon at the head of the table, holding court, and me sitting quietly at the end of it, waiting for the inevitable moment when the conversation would turn to me. It didn't take long. Brandon slammed his napkin down on the table so hard the wine glasses trembled. He looked at me the way you'd look at something you scraped off your shoe. "Nobody is ever going to buy your ridiculous gadget, Elena," he said, his voice dripping with the kind of condescension only a favorite child can perfect. "Stick to your day job, little sis. This isn't a real business. It's a sad hobby for someone who can't handle the real world." The table erupted into laughter. My mother's polite chuckle. My father's low, resigned sigh that somehow hurt worse than laughter ever could. It was a chorus I'd heard 100 times before, and every time, it landed like a small, precise blade between my ribs. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I picked up my wine glass, took a slow sip, and let my eyes drift to the antique grandfather clock ticking against the far wall. 14 hours. That's all that stood between this dinner table and the moment my entire family's understanding of me would collapse. In 14 hours, financial news outlets around the world would report that Google was acquiring my company, Grid Logic, for $600 million. They had no idea. Brandon, mid-sentence about his newest luxury condo development, had no idea that while he postured and preened, I was quietly holding the keys to a deal that would make his entire net worth look like a rounding error. They looked at me and saw a woman who'd wasted her 20s in a garage. I looked at them and saw a house already on fire, and nobody inside it had smelled the smoke. Yetto understand what that dinner table cost me, you have to understand what came before it. I grew up in a house where my worth was measured against my brother's. Brandon was older, louder, and, according to everyone at every family function, the one with the head for business. I was supposed to go into marketing, or human resources, or teaching. Something safe. Something that wouldn't embarrass anyone at Thanksgiving. Instead, at 26, I walked away from a comfortable engineering job at a mid-size firm and moved into my parents' garage with a laptop, a whiteboard, and an idea that most people thought was insane. A machine learning system that could optimize how power grids distributed energy in real time, cutting waste by double digits and preventing the kind of rolling blackouts that had become an annual event in half the country. Brandon called it a toy. He said it to my face, to our parents' faces, to anyone who would listen at a dinner party. Meanwhile, he was busy inheriting a chunk of our father's retirement fund to pour into flashy real estate developments. Luxury condos he loved to photograph himself in front of, wearing sunglasses indoors, captioning the pictures with words like vision and legacy. Nobody asked where the money for those developments was actually coming from. Nobody looked too closely at the financing structure, the shell companies, the numbers that didn't quite add up if you knew where to look. I knew, because I'd built software that lived and breathed in spreadsheets. I noticed patterns for a living. And what I saw in my brother's business, quietly, over years, was rot. But that wasn't my fight. Not yet. My fight was in that garage. 3 years of debugging code until my eyes blurred and my hands cramped. 3 years of eating instant noodles with my 2 co-founders because we couldn't afford to pay ourselves. 3 years of watching utility companies reject us, then question us, then finally, quietly, and without any fanfare, start fighting each other to license our algorithm. Nobody at that dinner table knew about the patents. Nobody knew about the pilot program that cut grid losses by 14% in a mid-size Oregon utility. Nobody knew that 6 months before that Sunday dinner, Google's energy division had reached out, not the other way around. They just knew I hadn't bought a house yet. They just knew I still drove a car with over 140,000 miles on it. To them, that was proof enough that I was failing. I let them believe it. Because I understood something Brandon never did. Silence isn't weakness. Silence is ammunition you haven't fired yet. After dinner, I excused myself to the garden for air. The Seattle drizzle had started, that soft, endless mist the city is famous for, and it felt like the only honest thing in the entire house. I checked my phone in the dark. One new email, from my lead engineer, Priya, the woman who had believed in grid logic back when it was 4 lines of untested code and a dream. The subject line read, "Signatures complete, we're done." I opened it with hands that were, for the first time in months, completely steady. Every signature was in. The deal was locked, notarized, immutable. Google's legal team had signed off on the final terms an hour earlier. Public announcement. 8 a.m. the next morning. I looked back through the bay window at my family's dining room, lit gold and warm, laughter still drifting out into the wet night air. Brandon was gesturing wildly with his hands, no doubt explaining to my parents how his newest project was going to be the one that finally made him a household name. He had no idea the ground beneath him had already started to give way, not because of me, but because he'd spent a decade building on sand and calling it bedrock. I drove home through the rain in my beat-up sedan, the quiet broken only by the frantic thud of my own heartbeat. Brandon's words echoed in the car with me: sad hobby, ridiculous gadget, can't handle the real world, and for the first time in 3 years, they didn't sting. They just sounded small. Petty. The words of a man about to learn a lesson he'd spent his whole life avoiding. Back in my modest apartment, I sat on my worn sofa and let it finally sink in. Tomorrow, the name Elena Vance would appear across every major financial outlet in the country. Tomorrow, a woman who'd been told for years that she wasn't serious enough, wasn't ambitious enough, wasn't enough, period, would be the story. It wasn't loud, the feeling. It wasn't fireworks. It was something quieter and colder and infinitely more satisfying, the certainty that I had never needed anyone's permission to be exactly who I was. I woke before my alarm, made coffee, and sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, watching the countdown clock in my head tick towards 0. At exactly 8 a.m., the world shifted. It wasn't a quiet trade blog picking up the story. It was the lead story, CNBC, Bloomberg, The Wall Street Journal, all running some version of the same headline: Energy Tech Breakthrough. Google acquires Grid Logic in record-breaking $600 million deal. My phone didn't just buzz. It convulsed against the kitchen table, message after message stacking up faster than I could read them. My mother first: Elena. Is this a mistake? They're saying your name on the news. They're saying you're worth hundreds of millions. Then again, 90 seconds later, the tone already shifting: oh my God. Oh my God, Elena. Call me. Call me right now. My father followed, stiffer, but I could feel the shock radiating through every word. We are so proud of you, sweetheart. Why didn't you tell us you were working on something so big? I set the phone face down on the table and let it buzz itself out. 3 years of hearing maybe you should look into marketing and why can't you be more like your brother, erased in the span of one news cycle, the second my net worth crossed a number they respected. But the message I was actually waiting for never came. Brandon's name was nowhere on my screen. Not a single text. Not a single call. I found out why an hour later, scrolling through the same financial newsfeed that had just made me a headline. Directly beneath the story of my acquisition sat another story from the SEC's Public Enforcement Division. A formal investigation into the Vance Development Group for securities fraud, falsified tax filings, and the use of an offshore shell company to conceal a 9-figure shortfall in construction financing. My success and his unraveling, printed on the same page, in the same news cycle, on the very morning I became a person my family finally noticed. I want to tell you I felt guilty. I didn't. I felt like a woman who had spent a decade holding her breath, finally allowed to exhale. I drove into the city that morning to meet my team at what would soon be our new headquarters. The energy in that building was unlike anything I'd ever felt. Champagne corks popping in the hallway, engineers who'd survived on ramen and unpaid overtime for 3 years suddenly, quietly, becoming millionaires. Priya cried when she saw me. So did I. For years, we'd been told we were building a toy. That afternoon, in a building full of people who had bet everything on an idea nobody else believed in, it finally felt like the world had caught up to the truth. Later, alone in a temporary office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Seattle skyline, my phone rang. Unknown number. I already knew. Elena. Brandon's voice cracked on the second syllable. Gone was the golden boy swagger, the condescension that had defined every conversation we'd had for a decade. In its place was something raw and frightened. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, or how you managed to leak information to the SEC, but you need to call them. Tell them it's a misunderstanding. We're family, Elena. Family helps family. I let the silence sit for a moment before I answered. Brandon, I said, my voice level in a way that surprised even me. You aren't calling because you're my brother. You're calling because you need a parachute. And I'm afraid the landing is going to be a lot harder than you think. I hung up before he could respond. He showed up at the Google campus less than 2 hours later. No appointment, no warning, just a man in a $3,000 suit shouting at a front desk not trained to handle a meltdown of this magnitude. I watched it happen on the lobby monitor from my office, and after a moment, I told security to let him up. If he wanted to dig himself deeper, I wasn't going to stop him. He slammed my office door shut behind him. Are you out of your mind? He shouted, skipping any pretense of a greeting. The feds are at my office right now. They're seizing hard drives. Do you understand what this does to our family's name? I stayed seated, letting the silence stretch until the absurdity of his volume became obvious even to him. I think you're confused, Brandon, I said finally. The family name wasn't at risk when you were inflating property values and hiding a shortfall in an offshore account. That was all you. I don't owe you cover for your own decisions. He looked around my office, the skyline view, the framed coverage of the acquisition, the quiet, unmistakable weight of real, earned power, and I watched something shift behind his eyes. He wasn't talking to his little sis anymore, and for the first time in his life, he seemed to understand it. We're family, he said again, softer now, more desperate. Who helped you get your first credit card? Who told you that you were smart enough to go into tech when Dad wanted you selling insurance? You owe me, Elena. Call your contacts. Tell them this investigation is biased. I actually laughed. Not out of cruelty, out of genuine, exhausted disbelief. You didn't do any of that because you believed in me, I said. You did it because it made you feel generous. You didn't support me, Brandon. You used me as a prop in your own story, right up until the moment I stopped being useful to it. As for what I owe you, 3 years of covering dinner bills while you called my company a toy, I think we're square. I slid a file across my desk, a preliminary due diligence report on his collapsing real estate portfolio, part of a distressed asset review my new employer had asked me to consult on. I'm not the one destroying you, I told him. Your own greed did that. I'm just the person who built something real while you were busy stealing the bricks out of your own foundation. He left without another word. I watched him go, and for the first time in a decade, I didn't feel small in his presence. I felt like the only person in the room who had actually been telling the truth. The final confrontation happened 3 weeks later, in a mahogany-paneled boardroom I'd been asked to attend as part of the acquisition team evaluating the Vance Development Group's distressed assets. Brandon was already there when I walked in, pacing in a suit that suddenly looked 2 sizes too big for him, mid-sentence about market fluctuations and unforeseen regulatory delays. He looked up, saw me, and the color drained out of his face like someone had pulled a plug. I didn't sit in the chair he'd nervously pulled out for me. I took the seat directly across from him instead. Gentlemen, I said, sliding a tablet toward the board chairman. I'm here on behalf of the team reviewing the Vance Development Group's financials. After examining the files my brother left unsecured on a company server, I think we have quite a bit to discuss. Brandon tried to laugh it off. She's my sister, he said to the room. She's emotional. She doesn't understand commercial real estate. I understand it perfectly, I said. That's the problem. For the next 20 minutes, I walked the board through it, the wire transfers, the falsified invoices, the shell company routing investor capital into personal debt. I didn't raise my voice once. I didn't need to. Every slide did the work for me. By the end, Brandon wasn't arguing anymore. He was just watching, hollow-eyed, as the version of himself he'd spent a decade constructing came apart in real time. You're destroying our family, he said quietly, when the chairman finally asked him to leave. Don't you care what people will say? I cared for a long time, I told him, standing to gather my things. I cared about your approval more than I cared about my own peace. You spent a decade calling me a failure for building something real. Look around this room. Brandon. Who's the failure now? Security walked him out. At the door, he turned back one last time, all the arrogance finally gone from his face, replaced by something almost childlike. Why? He asked. Why did you do this? Because you always told me to stick to my day job, I said. My day job is identifying structural failures and fixing broken systems. You were the biggest structural failure I've ever seen. I was just doing my job. 3 months have passed since that boardroom. Brandon is out of the industry entirely, no longer the golden boy of the Vance family, but a cautionary tale people whisper about at country clubs. I hear, secondhand, that he's living in a small apartment in the suburbs, trying to find work that doesn't require a background check. He sent me a letter once, full of apologies and explanations. I never opened it. Some bridges aren't meant to be repaired, they're meant to be left behind. My parents still call sometimes, asking when we can put this behind us and have a normal Sunday dinner again, as if a decade of being told I wasn't serious enough could be undone with a pot roast. I've stopped trying to make them understand. I've realized that chasing their approval was the very thing that kept me small for so long. This was never really about the $600 million, or the headlines, or the title of founder attached to my name in every article. Those were just the byproduct. The real victory was quieter than that. It was finally understanding that I never needed anyone's permission to take up space in my own life. Look at my team now. Brilliant, loyal people who believed in an idea when no one else would, and I know I built something that will outlast every glass tower Brandon ever put his name on. Not because I stepped on anyone to get here. Because I simply refused to disappear. If you've been listening to this story from the beginning, here's what I want you to take from it. Never apologize for the space you take up, or the success you earn. If the people closest to you can't celebrate your growth because it threatens the story they've told about themselves, that isn't your failure to fix. It's theirs. I'm Elena Vance. And for the first time in my life, I'm not waiting for anyone's permission to be exactly who I am. Look at my team now. Brilliant, loyal people who believed in an idea when no one else would, and I know I built something that will outlast every glass tower Brandon ever put his name on. Not because I stepped on anyone to get here. Because I simply refused to disappear. If you've been listening to this story from the beginning, here's what I want you to take from it. Never apologize for the space you take up, or the success you earn. If the people closest to you can't celebrate your growth because it threatens the story they've told about themselves, that isn't your failure to fix. It's theirs. I'm Elena Vance. And for the first time in my life, I'm not waiting for anyone's permission to be exactly who I am.